Hello! Okay, so, for the final round, we were already told this ahead of time, we haven't gotten our materials or anything like that. Arda will be partnering up with RIT Dye, so I'm sure we're really doing some sort of custom coloring. But in the meantime, we got our dyes ahead of time. We haven't gotten our materials, but we got our dyes. And it's the Proline powder dye from RIT. Now, I'm not sponsored by RIT in any way. I don't sell RIT in any way. I don't really have anything to gain one way or another on how well this works. That we're being sent this, and I'm excited to be able to do some new testing, but I also a little skeptical as to how much it's improved in the past 10 years, because I did do extensive testing with RIT's dye for synthetics back in 2003. So let's talk a little bit about that first. When I was researching custom coloring methods, I of course tried anything that anybody said worked for them to see how it would work for me and also for others in an extensive environment on different types of things. Not just like it worked on this one wig this one time. It's like, okay, but there's lots of different types of wigs, lots of different types of fibers, lots of different types of styles and applications, and we want to make sure that whatever we're recommending for people to use is going to be the easiest and most universal thing, because otherwise you get a lot of very sad people when they spend $50+ on a wig and then try to dye it and it doesn't work out the way they want it to. So I'm doing this as a buyer beware, as an educational video for you guys, and so you'll understand how these things work better. And yeah, so the methods I had tested before, all the various things that people suggested to try, and I tried them even though I knew some of them were just like, there's no way this is going to work. Kool-Aid, food coloring, that's basically what's in Kool-Aid. Diluted acrylic paint, spray paint, dye, dye like this, powdered dye for synthetic fabrics, because people go, oh, well, yeah, that should make sense, synthetic fiber. Spray-on hair color, hair mascara, vegetable dye for human hair, the kind that, when you have super bright hair that works in human hair. And I posted the results of this in, online, and then I additionally posted them in my book with the pros and cons of each one. Specifically for the powdered fabric dye for synthetic fiber, that was RIT that I was using back then. The pros were that it was mixable because it came in a powder form, so you could mix the dye colors together to try to create a custom shade. It was cheap. It's usually it's like $3 to $5 maybe for a packet, and that packet's going to last you quite a long time. You can get it at most grocery stores here in the U.S. I don't know in other countries, but it'll be in the same place that has the pantyhose and clothespins and things like that. And that it kind of works. It kind of works. I was using royal blue, and the closest I could get was sort of a sky blue, not really all the way to royal. However, there were the cons. First, with the kind of works category, the fiber itself would never come to royal blue, but the weft, where there was actual string, fabric, cotton string, was definitely royal blue. And well, if you're dyeing just a weft, you can be careful to not get the string part in there. If you're dyeing a wig, that's not an option at all. And the result was that you'd end up with a plaid head, because all of the wefts and all of the elastic would be dyed the darker shade, but the fiber itself would be just a little bit lighter. And as we've seen in some of the previous wigs we're working on, you can see through the fiber to the wefts. So if the wefts are much more saturated and darker than your fiber, you're gonna look like you have a plaid head. The staying power really seemed to vary depending on which type of fiber I put it on. Like just between Kanekalon and Toyokalon, there was a huge difference in how long it would actually keep that color in there before it started to wash out. It did not permanently embed. It embedded for quite some time. It stained for quite some time. But after I would do 50 washes with each one and see what it looked like later. It's a little bit lighter, took a little bit of it out, and but on the Toyokalon, it took a lot of it out. And then the last thing, and probably the most important thing, is the fact that you have to use heat in order for it to work. You're told to put it in a pot of water, boiling hot water, So anything you put in there that's pre-styled in any way, so if you have a ringlet or you just wanted it to be straight in the first place, whatever you had that you put in, you pull it out, it's now going to be affected by heat. And depending on the fiber, that could also mean that you're either damaging or singeing your fiber, or you're just simply removing any styling you have whatsoever. So those were issues that were present with the RIT dye for synthetics, the old one before. So on the Proline, I'm reading the packaging on the back, and huge disclaimer, of course, RIT is not selling this to dye wigs. It is specifically to dye fabric. So all the instructions on the back are to dye fabric, and there's nothing on here specific to wig fiber. And that's not a cover your butt by RIT or anything. It's just that this is not the market it's designed for. So anything we do, we have to try to adapt to be for wig fiber. The reason that it sticks better in fabric than it's ever going to stick on wig fiber, and I explain this in the book as well, is the fact that wig fiber is going in one direction. It's a monodirectional fiber, right? But if you are using fabric, you have weaved it in between. So now you've basically created a net. So all of the places that the dye can settle in between those cracks increases in a synthetic fabric. So when I'm reading the instructions, the big alarm bell I'm seeing here is when it talks about the temperature that you need to use for synthetic fibers. So it says heat on stovetop 140 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit for natural fibers, or 180 to 212 when working with synthetic materials. Now the magic melting point, or the magic malleability point, for Kanekalon and Toyokalon is 175. So that's below the lowest amount they want it to heat to in order to use it for the dye. We're also going to test this on classic fiber, but let's get to some other stuff it says on here. It contains salt, which will have no effect on the synthetic fiber at all. That's mostly for cotton. Anionic and ionic, I can never say that right, ionic surfactants. Now, let's talk for a bit about what a surfactant is in chemistry terms. All you people out there who took chemistry hopefully will remember what this is, or have an idea what I'm talking about here. I'm not gonna talk about this in nerd terms, so let's simplify this down a bit. A surfactant, and we'll take a common one that you guys would all understand and recognize: detergent. Now, how detergent works is that basically there's a part of the detergent that wants to hold on to grease, and there's a part of the detergent that wants to hold on to water. So it's like you got two different ends, two different little grippy hands that want to hold on to two different things. So you put the detergent in the water, and the detergent grabs the oil, the dirt, the bad stuff that's in your clothes, and the other hand holds the water. And so basically what it does is it grabs the dirt, it takes it out of the clothes and puts it in the water, so that when you rinse it out, the dirt rinses away with the water. Does that make sense? It kind of bonds onto it, it holds onto it and takes it away. And there's different surfactants that have different properties of the types of things they like to hold hands with. This is how I explain it to my son when we're talking about chemistry. You know, that a molecule wants to hold hands with another molecule. So surfactants help make this little interface between two different types of things. And in some cases they do it like a detergent. They take something, they take a grease out and they hold the water. In some cases they help things stay together, or sometimes they help suspend things. Like for instance, if you have like a salad dressing, I'm trying to think of something that I know this is going to be happening in, and you have oil and you have water. Oil and water will never mix. They're never going to play nice together. But if you have a surfactant that bonds to one and the other, what it'll do is it'll take the oil and it'll bond, and it'll hold on to the water on the other side, to the point that the oil and the water combine, although they're technically not combined. It's they're still in there, bound individually by the surfactant, but the oil and water will not separate. So it can be used as an anti-separation agent as well. So I'm gonna have to take a shot in the dark in this one, that what they're attempting to do is to get bond into the dye and I'm hoping the dye and the surface tension of the actual plastic itself. But it might just be that that's always been in there and they just never bothered to list it before. So we'll see. It's a little slightly different process. There are Non-ionics are the ones that are going to also bind with alcohol, so that's actually a similar concept as we're using alcohol dye, that it's embedding into the surface of the plastic itself when you're using the alcohol. But we'll see. Like I said, we're going to test it. Dye penetrates fibers to color them, and therefore the material needs to be clean of any finishes before dyeing. So if working with fabric, wash once with traditional laundry detergent is sufficient. If working with wood, etc., make sure it's raw where you plan to dye. Now we're going to be working with synth fiber, which by default most of the time has absolutely no finish on it. Some brands do, and you'll be able to tell by touching them. You'll have a strange residue on your hands after you touch them. It really depends on the quality of the fiber, the manufacturer, and whether or not they're intentionally putting finishes on. I have noticed when working with classic fiber, the more that you touch it, the more you feel like your hands are covered in Teflon. Now, that is probably what contributes to the heat-resistant quality of it, but to me that feels like a finish. I've created a little bath for the wig and the strip of heat-resistant fiber. This is laundry detergent, as they recommend on the package. I'm using Arm & Hammer baking soda powder detergent, which is what I use when I'm cleaning dreadlocks because it's so good at getting everything out. So I'm going to test a treated piece and an untreated piece to see if there's any difference in it. Because the classic fiber is a heat-resistant type fiber, that means that we're going to be able to get hotter without any singeing or damaging to the fiber itself. But you know, we'll talk about in a separate video the disadvantages of the heat-resistant fiber. And this is not just the classic fiber from Arda. This is also so the heat-resistant fibers you're getting from anywhere. It seems a little daunting on this, and I hope it's not going to be the case when we're using it for synthetic fiber. Is in addition to the fact that this is supposed to be in 180 to 212 degree water, the next thing says maintain this temperature for the duration of the dyeing process. And additionally in the instructions that we are supposed to be stir it constantly for 30 minutes or until you have reached the desired color. That's a long time. So I hope it's not that long. Wow, my arm will really hurt. We will be testing on an entire wig. We will be using a untreated piece of classic, or excuse me, an untreated piece of heat-resistant fiber, a treated piece of heat-resistant fiber, an untreated piece of Kanekalon, a dreadlock, a ringlet, and then we will do it on the shapeshifter fiber as well. See what our results are. We're going to be using the same color on all of them. The base colors will be different, but that's okay because we'll be comparing it to the base color to start with. So if it's like on a blonde piece versus a pink piece, we're going to be able to see whether or not it's sticking. Then we're going to look at the results and see how it works. So it's exciting. Okay, so here we have all of the different things that we're going to be testing today. We have the washed and unwashed strips of the heat-resistant fiber. As per the package instructions, I went ahead and washed this in detergent ahead of time. The yellow one indicates the one that's been washed. The orange one is default as is. This is shapeshifter fiber. We have two different pieces so we can compare when we're done. This is a Kanekalon dreadlock. This is a crochet dread. Same thing with this. This is a Toyokalon. This one has been sealed. And sealing does not indicate any chemical change. That means it's already been through the steamer, is all that means. This is a Toyokalon ringlet. This is a Kanekalon ringlet. And then we have a Kanekalon loose manufactured red, the kind that just separate if you pull them apart. We have a Kanekalon wig, an entire wig. And then just for poops and giggles, a dollar store Saran hair wig. And we're going to be dyeing all of these and seeing what it's going to look like for all of them. Okay, so we're going to take a moment, read the mixing instructions that they are telling us to do, and talk a little bit about this while I'm waiting for my water to get to the right temperature that they recommend. Now, a couple of things that they're saying in preparing the dye solution. Now, remember, this is not designed for wigs, okay? So I want to explain to you why things are the way they are in here. It says, wear gloves. For every pound of dry fabric, because usually when you're dyeing fabric, you're doing it by the pound, how much you're going to use is 2 full scoops for the 2 cups of hot water, 140 degrees. I'm waiting for that to come. And then add the dye solution to one of the 3 dye bath options below. They have one for cotton, linen, or rayon, and they have one for silk, wool, nylon. And they said, but for either anything you do, you're always going to add 1 tablespoon of liquid detergent to all dye baths to help with even dye dispersion. The reason for that is because they're asking you to add even more surfactants to it to try to promote the dye bonding. Now, for cotton, adding salt. When you're doing natural fibers, adding the salt in there is going to help. But rayon is not a natural fiber. That's okay. So you'll, well, wait a second. So should I use this instruction for synthetic fiber? No, because the salt's not going to affect the plastic at all. When dyeing silk, wool, or nylon, well, you're like, well, wait a second. Nylon's also synthetic, so maybe that's close to it. To add the vinegar. But the reason you add vinegar when you're dyeing silk or wool, silk and wool are both created by animals. They're protein based, and the vinegar is an acid. The acidity makes it easier for the dye to embed because it is attacking the protein. So vinegar isn't really going to attack the plastic. We could try that method. What we're going to do by default this time is just do the water, the dye, and the detergent. Now, they're asking you to add liquid detergent, and this, again, is a little alarm bell for me because they make a point of also saying on here that if there's any kind of surface or any kind of finish on the surface, that they can't guarantee the results. But if they're asking you specifically to use liquid detergent, most of the time your liquid detergent is going to have something in it besides just detergent. It's going to have like a fabric softener component maybe, or maybe something that'll say that's like a color protect component to it. So I'm not going to use liquid detergent. Instead, I'm just going to use the baking soda, the Arm & Hammer, because if we want to see something, you want to see something interesting? Let's see, zoom here. What are those ingredients again? The first 3 ingredients are the exact same thing that's in the dye. So you're looking at salt, anionic, and non-ionic surfactants. Same 3 starting components. Now they may not be the exact same surfactants, but the fact is, or the fact remains that it's basically using the same method to remove stuff as it is putting it in. So we're down to 152. Wants us at 140. Let's go ahead and open this up and get our scoopy scoops ready. We're going to be adding it to the hot water. I'm going to take this out of the cup. It's going to start to cool in a bit. So 2 cups hot water. Now it says that whatever you do for your dye bath, to make sure there's enough room for your fabric to move around, but we're only dyeing very small amounts of fiber here, so we don't actually need a lot of room. Shoot. 2 cups. Check our temperature again, leave this in here. Now, mind you, this is before we even started the heating process. This is just to dissolve the dye to start with. Okay, yeah, we're at 140 again. And I'm going to put in my 1 tablespoon of detergent. And then I'm going to use the scooper that comes with this, and hopefully I can actually get it open while I have gloves on. Let's see. Great. You ever try putting sweaty gloves that are already inside out back on your hands? It's not easy or fun. It comes in a crystalline form, just like normal RIT dye does. The synthetic, the what's it called, the Dymore line, actually says that it's for nylon and other synthetic fabrics. So I'm kind of curious why we got this one instead, but we'll see how it works. There's 1. And 2. And as a lovely side note, if you want to make a little Devo hat for a Barbie when you're done, you can use this scoop. Okay, we are trying to do our best to keep it within the range, but it's pretty hard when you have a small amount of liquid to keep the same temperature and stir and do all this at the same time. So we're bopping around within the range they tell us we're supposed to be at. Anywhere down into see now it's all the way up to 206. Depending on how much I move the dye bath around, basically. I wanted to try to get it down closer to the 180 mark, just to do as little damage to the fiber as possible. It's really taking some finesse to get it to stay around there. So, it is at a boil, as you can see here. A low boil. And I've got the heat down a bit more, but I don't know if we're going to be able to just sit at 180. If I drop it down to 6, it seems to drop below too fast. 199, 202, no. Alright, so we're going to be somewhere in the 200s. It's not really going to let us play. Alright, so let's give it a go. See what happens when we put these various things in. Now, I think this is the saddest one. The ringlets. My prediction, they're going to go straight, but we'll see how well they dye. That's like black. Well, hopefully we can put it in and not have it go for a long period of time. I know it says to keep it in there for up to 30 minutes. We will see if this is just dye sitting on the surface or if it's any integrating in there. Because if we leave it in any longer, you can see it's already starting to frizz from this temperature. And it's definitely bone straight now. We'll check what we're at again. Says we're hovering around 200 still. Next, we are going to try the Toyokalon ringlet, which will probably not do even as well. Again, it's going to straighten it immediately. And it's very frizzed. It's wrecked. Okay, so that one's never ever do this with your ringlets. This is the unwashed. This is the washed. See if there's any difference in the two. And then we'll also put in the shapeshifter fiber. Alright, our temperature's definitely come down, so we'll see where we're at now.
We're still a little high, but we're a lot closer to that safe range now.
Okay, now I'm going to put in the Kanekalon crocheted red. Now, since boiling is normally an acceptable process to use for this type anyways, and exposing it to heat is really not going to make much difference. Let's go ahead and try that. See how well that's going to stick in. Now see, with dreads, they have that advantage just like fabric does, that there's netting basically for it to stay into, so I predict this one will probably hold it pretty well. It's not holding quite as well in this. I can see already the surface is a lot lighter than it was on the Kanekalon. Hey guys, okay, so now all of these have been dyed, rinsed, and dried according to package instructions, and I wanted to show you the results of what we have. We're not going to go into these two in a sec because these are little, well, I'll explain later, but anyways. Okay, so first up, as predicted, the heat required in order to be within their operational limits for temperature, which was 180 to 212 degrees Fahrenheit was too hot for anything that was not specifically a heat-resistant fiber and did result in fiber damage. Surprisingly, some of the time it also resulted in it just not working at all. So this is the this was the Toyokalon ringlet. You can see it is wrecked. Obviously it's not a ringlet anymore, but it's also, the fiber is burnt. It's crispy. It's not happy. The color embedded pretty well, but the fact that it's completely wrecked means this is a undesirable result. I would call this a failure. Next we have the Kanekalon ringlet. Held up a little bit better just because the denier is a little bit thicker on this one than the Toyokalon, but also there are singe marks. And obviously it's not a ringlet anymore. It's straightened due to the heat. But there's singe marks, there's dents, there's burn all along this. And the color, you know, it did dye it, but it didn't dye it royal blue. I mean, I'm not expecting this to turn blue. Obviously it's red, it's going to turn a purplish tone. But that difference in shade is so slight that this is not, it didn't really absorb the way that you would hope it would in using that color and that temperature range. This one, surprisingly, absorbed absolutely no color at all. This is the Kanekalon Manufactured Red, and this is one of the ones you would kind of expect would hold some of the color because it would be trapped inside of the fiber, but it didn't. It just came right off. It didn't soak in at all. We have like a slight discoloration towards the tips if you look at the comparative color, but it didn't color it. And that's at the temperature they asked us to do it at. Because it was already dreaded, you can't really see the damage so much. I mean, it's there, but it did not color it. So that was a little surprising there. Just for giggles, I waited until the fiber was the dye had cooled all the way back down to room temperature, just to see what would happen if we dipped a ringlet in it cold. Because you know, if you dye your ringlets cold, they don't lose their shape. But it also didn't really dye it. It just didn't work at all in the cold. So it has to have, the dye has to be working at that temperature in order to be effective at all. Not super surprised there, but okay. So these are the two heat-resistant fibers. This is the classic. This is the pre-washed one. This is the not pre-washed one. You can see the results are pretty much identical between the two as far as the color is concerned. And this is the shapeshifter fiber. Not damaged by this. Actually, there's some singe at the bottom of the shapeshifter, but that's where it actually touched the bottom of the pan. So the color, it did color it, but that is not what I would call royal blue. It, again, just like with the synthetic dye before, it doesn't really get the hold in there. It's not as potent. So it's kind of like a quarter of a shade of what you'd expect it to be. Which it's pretty, but this isn't royal blue. And on top of this isn't royal blue. You can look at, there is a difference, there's a tonal difference, but it's not as considerable as we would expect it to be with this color of dye and this potency of dye. And actually, you know what, I have a great example. So let's go to this first. These are the two dreadlocks. Now, this is the base color, and you can see about halfway down, this was the result of using the dye for the exact same bath that I used for the high temperatures, exact same one. It kind of dyes it, but you can see it's just kind of, it's very, very light. It's making this blonde just kind of appear gray here. It's giving a very slight lavender tint into this one. The darker at the bottom was I went back in after this had been rinsed and dried. I allowed it to dry again, and I went back and did a second bath at the tips to put a second coat on to try to get it drier. Now, on the dreadlock, that's fine because the dreadlock is already, it's already ratted, it's already messed up like that. That's okay for it to be in for even more heat, but that just is not going to fly for something else like this. And having to be re-dyeing the layers over and over seems a bit tedious when I would think that we could just get it in one go, leaving it in for longer and getting it in one go, because this was left in, this part was left in for just as long as these were left in. And we did not get the same result. So, oh yes, okay, so let's move on to the wigs. Now, I made the decision, and you're going to be like, well, that's not keeping within the parameters, but I'll explain why. I made the decision to wait till I got the temperature down to 180 to do these, because 180 is just right there at the edge of its okay range, and it usually is not enough to singe Kanekalon fiber. In fact, when you're straightening a wig, you're going to go around 175 to 185 to get your range to straighten it out. So I knew that that wouldn't hurt the wig fiber itself. So, and that was still the 180, as long as I got up to 180, I was still within the range. So we danced around there. It wasn't way up like the other ones. The other ones were in 190 to 200 range while we're working at it. But, okay, as predicted, not really much of any effect to the actual wig fiber. But look at that. If this were a lighter wig, like if we had started with a white and we were trying to dye royal blue, the insides would look like this and the outside would still be white. So I was really hoping that they had addressed that, but they didn't. So it's just the same as it was before, the exact same result. And the party wig, this one's actually kind of funny. This is the dollar store wig, and because this is Saran fiber, I knew I had to bring the temperature down just a little bit further and to make sure it just didn't turn into a pile of slag. Surprisingly though, even at 170, which is what I did this at, it didn't relax the curls. Saran fiber is kind of hit or miss, weird. It's got some weird characteristics to it, but unfortunately it is what they make doll wigs from, and if you start to brush it too much, if anybody who's had a Barbie ever knows, it just turns into a ratted mess. So, didn't dye it at all. I mean, I have a swatch I cut off of it before. No color. Especially for a royal blue, we should see something on here. Didn't do anything at all. Weird though, when I went to go rinse it, so I rinsed it out, it looked like dark brown when it still had the dye in it, and I rinsed it, the cold water, and it turns orange. But then the interior was royal blue, but then as it dried, even that didn't stay royal blue. It turned to this very light grayish blue. So, yeah, not effective on that, not effective on the wig, and that was, we could say that part of that was because we brought the temperature range down from what they said it should be. But with the other wig, there's really no excuse for that, because we were still within their prescribed temperature range, even though we were at the low end of it. Dan, that was just because if you're going to dye a wig and you know ahead of time that you're putting it in a bath of hot water that will wreck it, then what's the point of dyeing your wig? So, in review, what we've learned so far is that you have to be within that temperature range in order for this to be effective at all. You have to be within 180 Fahrenheit to 212 Fahrenheit. If you're not in there, nothing's really going to happen. And unfortunately, that also means that you have to use heat-resistant fiber or do it on a dreadlock, which it doesn't matter if you burn it or not. But if you try it on standard Toyokalon or Kanekalon, you will damage your fiber. So that's not any different than it was before. That's not a plus, and in fact, that's actually detrimental. That's a lower grade than it was before, because at least before it was semi-working on Kanekalon. Now it's just if you do it too low, you're not going to get anything. So now, okay, people are like, all right, well, I have a heat-resistant fiber wig, so that's fine. I can just use it on my heat-resistant fiber, and it'll dye it. All right, well, here's the question for you then. If I buy a wig, and I love the style, but the color's not quite right, so I want to dye it. Well, what if that wig is curly? What if that wig has some feature about it that makes it that I can't just dye, I can't just very carefully dip it upside down? What if it has a scalp, something like that? I have to take my wig apart in order to dye it. That's like saying, wow, I really love this dress. It's not quite the right shade. So what I have to do is take it apart, dye it, and then sew it back together? That seems kind of backwards, really. So if you're dyeing wefts, if you're dyeing wefts because you're either using them to make your own wig, or you're using them to make extensions, or false bangs, falls, ponytails, things like that, and you don't mind if any styling is removed by the heat because you either want it to be straight or you plan to recurl it on your own anyway, then I think this works. You might have to really mess around with the shades to try to get the shade that you want, because obviously we didn't get royal blue on the first go. But that's up to you to experiment on your own to find the right color that you want. But if you're working with anything that is pre-styled, you can't keep your style. That's my take on it right now. I am going to continue testing. I am going to go into the durability of it. So we're going to put these pieces through the wash a couple times. Something that's really important, that if you're going, okay, I can wear a wig and I can dye it this way, that's great. You're going, oh, I have dreads, I can dye them this way, that's great. But this is what we got to test for. Because when you're putting on a wig that you've dyed, you're going to put it on, you're going to wear it, you're going to do your thing, you're going to take it off. But if you are getting dreadlocks and these are installed in your own hair, you're going to wash your hair. You're going to shampoo, you're going to take a shower, and we'll see how well it holds up to that. Because if you dye them, you install them, and 3 washes later they're a completely different color, that's not a desirable result. So anyway, we'll continue more testing, but this is what we got for right now, and we'll see you guys after we finish the next part. Okay, bye!